All so much for joining us tonight at the JDRF Let's Talk T1D education series. We are thrilled to have you with us tonight. And so a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. As I mentioned, I am recording this, you may know. And so please do keep your camera on, you're more than welcome, or turn it off. As we are a large group tonight, I would also ask if everyone would be able to put yourselves on mute, just so that we can reduce the background noise. And our speaker tonight, Elizabeth, will be talking for about 40 minutes for her discussion, and then we'll have plenty of time to open it up for any questions that you have. And there's a couple different ways that you can go about asking any questions. At the top of your screen, you will notice that there is a little raise hand function. So you're more than welcome to ask any questions, especially if you need any clarification on anything that's being said. Or we do have a chat feature, which looks like a little talking bubble, which is also at the top of your screen. And after Elizabeth finishes her formal presentation, we'll get through as many questions as time allows. And we can also do any follow-up for any additional questions if we can't get to any of the questions during the time together tonight. And so again, for anyone who may not know me, my name is Danielle. I'm the National Director of Volunteer Engagement here at JDRF. And I am one of the hosts of the Let's Talk T1D education series. And each month we bring together different speakers on topics that are of interest to the T1D community. And for anyone who is not aware, JDRF is a leader in working towards an end to type 1 diabetes through research, funding, and advocacy. And we also support people and families in the type 1 community from the time of diagnosis by helping those living with T1D to have better, healthier, and safer lives while we work to find a cure. And then just before I pass it over to Elizabeth, I do also want to make everyone aware of another series that we do have here. It's called the Connection Series, and it's an informal meetup that happens on the 4th Wednesday of each month, and it happens at both 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And there's no structured or formal program. It's just a chance for adults within the T1D community, as well as parents, to get together to chat with one another from across
the two meetings are
country.
linked.
And so again, I will ask everyone kindly to mute yourselves throughout the presentation, if you don't mind. And without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Elizabeth Moreau, who is the Director of Communications and Knowledge Translation to the Canadian Pediatric Society. And she's the staff lead for Diabetes at School, which is the first national initiative to focus on the in-school needs of children and youth with diabetes. And Elizabeth lives in Ottawa with her husband and 2 children, the youngest of whom was diagnosed with type 1 in 2013 when she was 4 years old. And so I am so thrilled to have Elizabeth here. This is her second year hosting this event. And thank you again so much, Elizabeth, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks so much, Danielle, and hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. And while I do that, I'm sorry, I just want to say thank you to JDRF for hosting this webinar on going back to school for everyone with kids with diabetes. This is a really important and sometimes challenging time of the year. So thank you very much for doing this. Danielle, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so Danielle mentioned that my youngest was diagnosed in 2013, and she's really the reason that I'm here. This is why I got into being interested in diabetes at school. This is my daughter. Just a few months after diagnosis, she entered kindergarten. And I will say it was the scariest summer of our lives. I had a lot of anxiety before school started and subsequent years. So I understand how you feel. Things have changed since 2013, thank goodness. There are a lot more resources for you, but you've done an amazing thing by coming here tonight. So hopefully I can help allay some of your fears and give you some resources and tips to get you prepared for September. I love this cartoon because this is how I often feel about my daughter at school. So, you know, she looks just fine. She looks just healthy. But there's this, you know, there's this thing called diabetes that that really presents challenges in her life at school. So if you are, as parents, you are all doing an amazing job keeping your kids healthy, and people don't realize what it's like behind the scenes, just how difficult it is to make that happen. I want to say a little bit about diabetes at school. We're a national initiative, as Danielle mentioned, run by the Canadian Pediatric Society, which is who I work for, but it's a partnership of the CPS, the Canadian Pediatric Endocrine Group, and Diabetes Canada. So probably most of your children's physicians are associated with one of these groups. So know that there are a lot of people, a lot of experts, and a lot of people who care about kids with diabetes standing behind this initiative and all this information. So we're going to talk a lot, I think, about, you know, striking this balance at school. It's challenging because as parents, if you look kind of on the left side of the fulcrum, we want to make sure that our kids are supported at school. We want to make sure, of course, that they're safe, and we want the adults around them to be vigilant and to be aware. And we want people to understand what their needs are. But at the same time, they're kids, right? So on the right side of the fulcrum, those are really their needs. They want to go to school and they want to fit in. They don't want to be thinking about diabetes. They want to do what all the other kids are doing, and they want us to treat them like kids first and a kid with diabetes second. And they certainly don't want to be stigmatized. So what we try to do with diabetes at school is try to balance these two needs. Our needs as parents.
Sorry, Elizabeth, I'm just going to interrupt you. Your slides are not changing.
Oh, okay. Hang on a sec. Let me try this one more time. They're not changing. Okay, sorry. Let me try again. Hang on. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, I'll try to share again. Hang on just a second. Sorry about that. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Can you see my slides now? Do you see? You probably see my presenter view now, do you?
We do see presenter view, but yes, we can see the slides.
Okay. Now can you see just one slide with a fulcrum?
You got it.
Okay. And now do you see something that says session goals?
Sure do.
Okay, perfect. So it's working now. Sorry about that. So what I'm going to talk about is really how to get you prepared for back to school, help you find some resources, talk a little bit about some common problems that you might encounter and how to solve them. And then hopefully in the Q&A, we'll hear from you and you can share your experiences with one another. Because if this is not your first time going back to school, if you're just here for tips and a refresh, then you probably have experiences that I don't have and that are, you know, really valuable for others on this session. So as I said before, Diabetes at School has 3 organizations behind it, and those 3 organizations have 2 policy documents, which is where all of the recommendations come from. They're both available online. The websites are there, and you might be familiar with them already, but I just put these up here so that you know when you go into school and talk about what your children need, that these are the organizations standing behind you. This is not just you as a parent wanting these things. All of these recommendations come from the experts in pediatric diabetes care. So the experts have come to consensus on the minimum that our kids need at school. And we're going to go into these in more detail, but just briefly, these are the things our kids need at school for the basics in diabetes care. So all kids need an individual care plan, which I'll talk more about. We need staff at school who are trained to provide the support that kids need. We need attention to meals and snacks, of course, because food is central to diabetes. We need attention to blood sugar, and we need kids to be able to check their blood sugar and eat whenever they need to and wherever they want to. If they want privacy, they have privacy. If they want to do it right then and there and they need to, then that's where it should happen as well. We want to pay special attention to low blood sugar and make sure that everyone, if they know nothing else about diabetes, they know how to recognize and treat low blood sugar. Older kids particularly will need accommodations for tests and exams. If they run into a low or they're not feeling well because of a high, they might need some extra time to recover. And where appropriate and where possible, we want to make sure that people are trained to administer glucagon in the unlikely event that that a child can't take care of themselves or can't ingest anything. And now, thankfully, we have nasal glucagon, so it does make things a lot easier than in the past. So as parents, of course, we have responsibilities. Our responsibility is not to be at school every day doing the diabetes care, but we do have responsibilities to maintain, foster, and nurture communication, to keep that going and have good relationships throughout the year. It's our responsibility to initiate the care plan and to make sure it's up to date. It's our responsibility typically to do training, and we'll get into that in more detail. And of course, it's our responsibility to make sure that all the proper supplies are at school and with our children, and that they're labeled. We have a communication mechanism in place for knowing when supplies need to be replenished, and that they're in appropriate locations in the school. So there are a lot of things that affect the school experience, and there are as many school experiences as there are people on this call and kids with type 1. So among the things among the variables to think about as I'm going through all of the other pieces are, of course, how long since your child was diagnosed. Kids who have been living with diabetes for longer, of course, probably are doing more self-management, and you as a parent will probably feel different as well. Their age, of course, plays into it. When your child is in kindergarten, it's a very different situation than when they're in grade 5, let's say. Their developmental stage as well, which may be aligned with their age, but it may not be. Your child may have other needs as well that affect what they can do or what they're willing to do. Insulin regimen, of course, plays a role. If they're not a lot of kids are still on the intermediate insulin NPH, but my daughter was when she first started school. She didn't need insulin at lunchtime. So that factors in. Technology, of course. Are they on a pump? Do they have a CGM, FGM? The school resources, what your school has access to, the number of people in there who are willing and able to participate in supporting your child with diabetes, and do they have any experience with diabetes? Typically, it's a good thing if they have experience with diabetes, but sometimes it's not, because sometimes they've learned things that you want them to unlearn. And of course, your resources. So what is your situation? Are you flexible? Are you, at home or working from home and you can go to school every now and then? Or maybe you work shift work and you're not available. Maybe your child is living at 2 different homes. So you have, 2 parents who need to be on board. So these are things that are going to affect your child's school experience and your experience and what needs to be done as well. This is a little video. I'm not going to play it, but I just want to alert you to this video that we have on YouTube, and it's also on Diabetes at School. And it's a nice overview from a rights point of view, talking about what kids with diabetes have the right to at school. And essentially, they have the right to all the things that any other student has the right to. And in this video, we talk about 3 primary rights: the right to be safe, the right to be supported, and the right to be included. And everything that comes and everything we do to prepare our children for school kind of falls into one of these rights. That's what we're trying to achieve. So I have a little back to school checklist that might be helpful for those of you who are going back to school for the first time. You've probably thought about a lot of this already. Of course, the very first thing you're going to want to do is get in touch with the school if you haven't already. You need to start with the principal because they are, of course, the boss at the school. Ideally, you want to meet with the principal and your children's classroom teachers. It is hard to get into schools nowadays, of course, but hopefully there's a way that you could at least do it virtually. In preparing, another first thing you want to do is find your school board's policy on managing diabetes or on managing medical conditions in school. If you're not sure where to look, of course, start with your school board's website. If you can't find a policy there, look for your provincial policy. We do have a list of provincial policies on diabetes at school, but most provinces now do have a high-level policy. So you're going to want to find that and familiarize yourself with what those expectations are. It doesn't mean that that's the only thing that you can expect, but it is a good place to start. As I mentioned, you're going to need to complete that individual care plan. And if you need help from your clinic, absolutely contact them, and I'm sure they'll be more than willing to help you fill it out. Of course, you're going to want to arrange for training. That might happen in that initial meeting, depending. And we do have a self-learning module that I'm going to talk about that you can refer teachers and school staff to as well to help ease the burden of that training on yourself. You're going to want to get your supplies. So you're going to want to think about where you want kits to be in the school and get all those supplies together. A really important piece to think about at the beginning of the school year is a communication system. So how are you going to send information back and forth to the school? Is it going to be in some kind of paper agenda? Is it going to be via text? And under what circumstances will information go back and forth? And a lot of that will be in the in your child's care plan, but you're going to want to think about what works well for you and what is going to work well for the school as well. Don't forget to involve your child and to make it special. Can be all kind of heavy and really serious, but there are ways to make it special depending on, especially if they're younger, by getting, I used to get for my daughter really special, fun little boxes to put her supplies in, things like that. So try to get them involved in it so they feel a part of this. Think about not just the teachers, but think about the other adults in your child's school life. If you have before or after school care, a bus driver, those folks you're going to need to connect with as well. And then, of course, give some thought as to, we're probably thinking about the first week of school, but give some thought as to checking in after a week, after a couple of weeks, it may be after a couple of days you need to, just to see how things are going and if there's anything that you need to adjust. So I talk a lot about the individual care plan. This is kind of the foundation for everything that goes on at school. So we have a template on diabetes at school that you can download as I think a Word document or a PDF and fill it out. It's a long document, but there may be pages or sections that you don't need to fill in. You can just cross them out or you can remove them if you can do that in Word. But the idea is that what we have done is put together everything that could possibly need to be in there so that you don't have to think about it. You can just kind of fill in the blanks and, tick the tick boxes that apply to your child and leave the rest blank or just, cross it out. But it's going to go into a lot of detail about protocols and timing for checking blood sugar, of course. So before meals, before snacks, what do you do around phys ed? Do you check, before and after, things like that? Of course, it talks about high and low blood sugar and what thresholds you want to be contacted at. So do you want to call when your child is over 15, for example, or is it 17? There's no hard and fast rule, but it's what works well for you and your family. There's a place to talk about insulin regimens, what to do at meals and snacks, as I mentioned, activity, and other aspects of your child's diabetes care at school. So everything is in here. Some provinces and school boards have templates. If they have templates, try to use theirs. I think that's just good practice. Some of them may even send a template to you to fill out. If their template, doesn't have what you need, then you can always use the one from diabetes at school. There may be things that aren't in the plan. Some details like how do you arrange snacks and lunches so that your carbs are pre-counted, and those are things that Another area where you can work with your child, you might have a special little, fun notebook where you list the carb counts for food, or maybe you use stickers on the food, things like that. Field trips are not covered in the plan. That's something that you need to think about separately. Special events with food, of course, because that's a case-by-case basis. How to handle changes to the activity routine. So for instance, if there's a, jump rope for heart day, or a Terry Fox day, or a track and field day, you may have different arrangements. And then, of course, supply teachers is a whole other piece where you'll want to make sure that there's information for supply teachers. The last 4 bullets, I think, really go back to the communication piece, because for each of those, although you can't always anticipate supply teachers, but for each of those last ones, you will do better if you have an ongoing communication with the folks at school, so that you know what's coming up, because you don't want to be surprised, right? You don't want your child to come home and say, well, I couldn't have a cupcake today because, I didn't know what to do. You really want to have that information ahead of time, so that as much as possible, your child can be included in everything that's going on in school, that they don't have to sit on the sidelines because somebody wasn't sure what to do. So training and education, of course, this is really key. And one thing to think about is that, you'll need to tailor the training to whoever you're talking to. And you really want to think about giving people the information that they need. Not everyone needs to know everything, right? We all know there's a lot to know about type 1, but you want to think about, what does this particular teacher need to know? What kind of contact do they have with my child during the day? How much time do they spend with them, and what are they doing with them? So, the gym teacher might need, if it's a different teacher, might need different information than the classroom teacher. Maybe your child has an EA. That's a whole other level of information that they will need. On diabetes at school, we have, it's going to show you down here at the bottom, we have 3 levels of information, if you will: awareness, literacy, and then expertise. And awareness, for example, is what we want all school staff to know. So we want them all to know a little bit about what type 1 is, and especially how to recognize and treat a low blood sugar, and what to do in the event of an emergency. And they may not need to know anything else, but they all need to know that there's a child with diabetes in the school. The staff who are responsible, so those classroom teachers, you want them to know a little bit more, right? Because they're with your child during the day. They may not be checking blood sugar or administering insulin, but they'll be there when your child is having lunch or having snacks and throughout the school day. So you want them to know a little bit more. And then, of course, those who are being trained to support with specific tasks, those are like the how to check blood sugar, or how to give a bolus, for example, on a pump. That's kind of the expertise level, and that is probably hands-on training that you are doing specific to your child's regimen and his or her technology, if they have them. This is the online module that I mentioned earlier. We actually just launched it today, and it is designed it takes about an hour to go through. It's not for us as parents, it's for educators and school staff. It's for people who are responsible for a child with type 1 throughout the day, and it's what they need to know. It's a self-directed learning, so they work through an online module. It takes them about an hour, and at the end of it, they'll get a certificate of completion, and hopefully they have learned all of the basics with type 1 to save you as a parent from going through all of that detail. And then you can really focus on the information that's relevant to your child. So they can do this at their leisure, and then you can focus what may be limited time on the things that are very specific to your child. So you can find a link to this on Diabetes at School. I've got the URL down there at the bottom. And I would encourage, if it's a teacher or a school staff member who knows nothing about diabetes, encourage them to do this before you, if at all possible, before you go in and meet with them. And then you'll be in a much better position to answer specific questions. These are two other documents that are available on Diabetes at School. And what's kind of neat about these is that there's specific information in there about what they can do to support kids and things that they should know. But it is a little bit about the why, what are the benefits of supporting kids with diabetes, and a little bit about some of the myths that we all encounter. So these are two documents that if you're preparing an information kit for your teachers or for school staff, you may want to have a look at these and include those in your kits.
Where'd you get?
These are two other resources also available on the site. The low blood sugar actually has a flip side. It has a little algorithm on how to treat low blood sugar. And I would also encourage you to put these in your kits, a few copies of the low blood sugar. You really want to encourage your school to put, especially that one, up in high traffic areas. Put it in the staff room, put it in the main office, maybe in your child's classroom. You really want to drive home what some of the symptoms are and what to do in the event that there's a low blood sugar to prevent it from becoming an emergency. So I mentioned before about tailoring the training. One example is, again, on Diabetes at School, there's a document on physical activity. This is something to refer a gym teacher to. And it goes through sort of the different things to know about physical activity. For example, that, some physical activity can raise blood sugar. Also that in which case, you don't want people suggesting that your child go run around the school if their blood sugar is high. These are one thing that a lot of us have encountered over the years. But these are the types of resources that you can find and enable you to tailor the training so that people have the information that they need. Because it can be overwhelming. There's a lot to know. So I think it's important not to expect everyone to know everything, but you want to think about what does that particular staff member need to know to keep my child safe and to make sure that my child can participate in everything that's going on at school. I just wanted to draw your attention as well to this little graphic on the homepage of Diabetes at School. We have a video series that there's 10 videos in addition to the rights and responsibilities that I showed you on specific aspects of diabetes. So it's just another way of communicating the information. There's a video on insulin, there's one on highs, there's one on lows, there's one on preventing emergencies, and so on and so forth. But again, these are good little primers for your teachers if they have specific questions about things, and let them know that they're there, that they could pull them up on their phone if they needed, if they had a question throughout the day. And the videos are all around 2 minutes long, so really bite-sized bits of information that they can use. A little bit about supplies. As I mentioned, I suspect you're all probably in the throes of preparing your supplies and your kits. Don't forget to put kits in multiple locations. Some of us have had issues where schools have bristled about where kits can be kept, but it's really important that they know that there needs to be more than one kit in multiple locations. For example, you may want to keep one in the gym in addition to your child's classroom. Another thing to think about is when kids go, when there's a fire drill and they go outside. I know at my daughter's school there were fire drill kits, and so I had separate supplies to go in the fire drill kit so that if my daughter didn't remember to take her stuff out there, at minimum there was juice and fast-acting sugar in those kits if they were out in the schoolyard for half an hour. And there was a blood sugar meter in there as well. So just think about all those different places in the school. Of course, it depends how big your school is, but you do have the right to have those kits wherever you think they should be. So just make sure your school knows that. You want to make sure that there's at least a glucometer with all necessary supplies. Make sure you're checking for expiration dates. You want to make sure that there's sugar in there, maybe a little granola bar for a snack, and of course make sure that all of your names and contact information is in the kit as well, and maybe with a little note saying, contact me if supplies start to get low, something like that. Some people do include other items in there. That really depends on some of those factors I mentioned before. How far away are you from the school to check on these things, and what kind of regimen your child is on. When it comes to technology, many of our kids are on pumps, or they're on CGMs or FGM like the Libre. We have 2 documents on diabetes at school. Again, these are designed for school staff and educators, but just to give them a sense, if they want a little overview on, well, what is this insulin pump, and what is this, this other sensor that my student is wearing. So you can find those, and you can download them on the site and include them in your kits if you need to. Something to think about too is involving kids in diabetes management, and what do you involve them in, and what they do at home may be different from what they do at school. And I guess the bottom line is that what they do is really your decision, right? As a parent, as a family, in collaboration with your child. I've had the experience, and I've heard many stories about schools kind of pushing students toward self-management, maybe prematurely, or earlier than the parents were comfortable with. If that happens, you don't need to let that happen. And if you need a little bit of backup, I think this is a really good document to remind people that, just because a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old can check blood sugar, maybe at home, maybe they do it, they certainly can't interpret the numbers. So we don't have to ask them to do that. And you can see we developed this in conjunction with pediatricians and with pediatric endocrinologists. And little kids shouldn't be expected to do very much. It's really your decision on what they do. I think that one of the most important things to remember as you're going through the school year is this whole piece of relationships and mutual benefits. So you will probably, if you're new to school, or if you're new to school with diabetes, you'll probably find yourself in school and in contact with school more than other parents. So hopefully that's okay with you. But it just tends to happen, right? Because there's a lot more communication with a lot more people in school. You get to know folks. So, if you have the time and inclination to be involved, it can be really helpful, to volunteer. I know there's not a lot of volunteering happening right now with COVID, but in normal times, if you can volunteer, if you're interested in sitting on your parent council at school and you have time for that, it can really help build those relationships. If you can't, that's okay too. I don't want anybody to feel badly about that. There's other ways to build relationships as well. But I think that those relationships will really help foster cooperation, from the school staff. And the idea of mutual benefit in that all of the training and the information gathering that we're asking people, the school staff, to do, it's not just for us and for our kids. It's going to help them because, I can understand how it might be a little scary for a teacher who's got, maybe 30 other kids to think about, to be the only adult in the room who knows how to treat a low blood sugar. And some adults are a little frightened by the idea of diabetes. And if you can help kind of suss that out, see how they feel about it, and empower them to handle situations, that's to their benefit. So just, we want to remind them of that this is about them as well, feeling good about supporting our kids. And as I said before, most important is that it will benefit our kids. It will keep them safe, it will keep them supported, and it will include them in school, which is I think is what all teachers want for all students. So everyone, everyone has encountered problems from big, from small to big, and hopefully you can prevent problems, but from getting too big. But sometimes they do, and sometimes you need to advocate. You need to take things to another level. So what can you do? Well, first of all, try to solve it at the level that you can solve it. If you can solve it, with the teacher, with the, your EA in the school, that's ideal. Know what policies are in place. And that's the first thing. If your school isn't following policies, well, that's the first place to start. If the policies are not adequate to keep your child safe, supported, and included, then there's advocacy that's needed. Try to follow the kind of line of, I won't say the line of command, but kind of the hierarchy, the natural hierarchy. So starting with the person involved, and if you're not able to resolve the problem at that level, then you go to the principal. If you can't resolve a problem with the principal, then you can go to staff at the school board. And if you can't resolve it there, then you can escalate to, for example, the school board trustees, who are elected officials in your region. I have seen folks have trouble at the very grassroots level with a teacher, and then want to escalate it immediately to a much higher level. And I'm not sure that that's the best thing to do in the spirit of building relationships. That being said, if someone is doing something to endanger your child, of course, it needs to be escalated, right away. Look at the issue and think, ask yourself, is it specific to you? Is it just something that, that you're experiencing, or is this maybe a system-wide or board-wide problem that other kids with type 1 are or may experience? In which case it may be helpful to connect with other parents. There are, I hope you guys know, there's lots of Facebook groups of parents with children with type 1. There's a national group where you can sometimes find people in your province or your region. And there are at least 2, and I think more, provincial groups. We have one in Ontario called SOS T1D. There's another one in Alberta. I think there's a parent group in Nova Scotia. So, it helps to connect with other parents and just say, is this happening to you as well? Maybe they can help you solve the problem, or sometimes, you can get together and you'll have a much more powerful advocacy voice if you're not alone. And then, of course, if you need more support, organizations like JDRF and as well Diabetes Canada are there to help you as well. Just a word about going back to school with COVID-19. I'm not a health professional, so I can't offer any advice, but just as a reminder that kids over 12 are eligible for vaccines, and all the expert groups recommend that they receive it, including kids with type 1 diabetes. So if your child is over 12 and hasn't been vaccinated, maybe get in touch with your family doctor, your pediatrician, or your clinic and talk about that. Kids under 12, I suspect most of you know it's usually mild illness, but they are at risk of passing it on. You don't want them to pass it on to more vulnerable people. That's why it's important that all of us who are eligible to be vaccinated get vaccinated to protect kids and other people who can't get vaccinated, as well as ourselves. Things are changing all the time. Here in Ottawa, we don't even really know what exactly is going to happen in our schools, but there are regional and provincial public health policies that are in place to help protect students from the virus. That might include masking, cohorting, or physical distancing. So different measures to keep all of our kids safe. And that's the end of my slides. So hopefully, I'm stopping to share, and hopefully you guys have some questions or comments to share. I'll turn it over to Danielle.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And as Elizabeth mentioned, please do, if you have any questions, you can write them out in the chat, or please do use the raise hand function. And just before we do go to, there's a couple comments in the chat. And before I go to those, I just want to reiterate what Elizabeth said. We unfortunately cannot offer any very particular health advice, and we would encourage you, if you do have very specific questions, about your child's management of their diabetes, do connect back to your primary health and diabetes care team. And I can start here while everyone's perhaps thinking about their questions. I can go with a comment here from Jen. She said, some physical activity can raise blood pressure. This is new to me. They're 2 months in. Her children go to a forest school where they're outside and active all day. This should be interesting.
Yeah, so again, I would, as Danielle said, I'm not a health professional, but what I do know from our health professionals and from my own experience is that, you know, there are some intense physical activities that can raise blood sugar afterwards, or you may have even a delayed low or a delayed high. But I think what's important to remember is that when blood sugar is already high, activity can make it go higher, and at that point it can be unsafe for your child. So I think that's more of what we meant by pulling up that point about physical activity raising blood sugar, and that it's the core message there is really that it should never be used as a way to lower blood sugar, because that is a misconception among folks.
Great. Thank you. And a quick note for me, it was about sharing the presentation and accessing the material. And I will let everyone know that this presentation will be, we'll send out a link and it's going to be posted on the JDRF YouTube page. So everyone will definitely get access to the full presentation. And Charlotte had a question here of what do you do if there are no nurses available to come to the school?
Right, that's a super important question, and one that many of us have had to grapple with. So there will be many places where you don't have a nurse coming to a school, and so someone needs to be trained to give your child insulin if and when they need it, either to give insulin with a pen, or to deliver a bolus. Or to supervise that if your child can do it and if you're comfortable with your child doing it, right? So again, it's going to depend on your child's age and what they typically do, but that's where the training comes in. And I think what's important is the expectation and having that expectation that this is a need that my child has, and let's work together to figure out how we can deliver this, because, for example, maybe you work 30 minutes away and you can't come to lunch, nor should you be expected to go to the school every day and give your child the lunch bolus of insulin. So people can be trained to do it. And I know I don't want to make it sound easy, because it's not easy. It's not easy. But that's where the training piece comes in, and talking about just what is needed, and how together you can make that happen.
Great. And I have a comment here from Linda. She said, I never thought of providing the school with the training and one-pagers for the staff room. This is amazing. I guess we can't assume that the staff already have that training.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It will certainly vary. Perhaps they've received some training if they had a child before, but in all likelihood, they have not. In all likelihood, they have not received any training. Here in Ottawa, for example, Ottawa Public Health goes in and trains teachers on an EpiPen every year. And the first year my daughter was diagnosed, they did a few slides on type 1, but which was, fine, but it was in no way adequate to support a child with type 1. So you absolutely have to do the training. Many parents have done the training themselves. There are some schools that, come back and say, well, no, we can't have a parent do the training. We need to have a medical professional do the training. That's where I would highly recommend the online training that we've done. And you can say to them, this is training that's coming from medical groups. So we had 2 pediatric endocrinologists work with us on that training. So it is almost like getting training from a medical professional. So if that's the response back from them, if they don't want you to do the training, then really encourage them to do that online module.
Great. And this leads well into a comment, because I think you've covered it there, from Sheila, who said, can someone other than me as a parent offer training to the school? And I think that resource that you guys have launched today is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. And Cindy has a question. We have been managing our child's type 1 in elementary school, and in the next year, our child will move into high school. Any experience with that or changes we should be aware of with that transition?
Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? Because things change, with every year, your child, does more and more and more. The core pieces of getting in touch with the principal so that they know that there's a student with type 1 is critical. That the classroom teachers know your child may be now starting to move around the school as opposed to just being in one homeroom class like they are in elementary school, although with COVID it's different, but that is one big change, that they're moving around. So you kind of have that to think about. You probably have a bigger building to think about. So different, you want to think about these different locations. Probably think more about what your child has on her, what kind of supplies she has on her at all times. You don't want her running back and forth to her locker, for example, to get low supplies. And I guess another thing to think about for high school is I didn't really talk about it a lot, but the accommodations for tests and exams. So to really let teachers know that blood sugar affects the way you think. Like if you have a low blood sugar, it affects your cognition, it affects the way you think. And so it can take up to a half an hour to recover from a low blood sugar. So, I've learned a lot from other parents who have high school kids, and some of them, for example, have their student check their blood sugar right before doing an exam and write it at the top of the exam, just so that they know. But, if they have a low blood sugar before the exam or in the middle of, they really have to stop, treat it, let themselves recover, and therefore have extra time. That's one thing you really don't have to think about much in elementary school, but that's important. And of course, the whole independence thing, right? Your students, your son or daughter is going to be a lot more involved in their care, and they might be more self-conscious about their care as well. So those are some other things to think about. I think that's where JDRF's ability to connect people is super helpful. Having people, high school students and or parents of high school students talk with each other about solutions would be super helpful.
Yeah, and I can, two resources I can add there as well. We do have a one-on-one program, a peer support program where we can connect parents with other parents who have had similar situations. And then we do also have that connection series that I mentioned, which offers kind of a group chat among parents to be able to connect and chat out different topics that are of importance. And the next question here is from Elena, and I'll answer this one a little bit, and then Elizabeth, if there's anything else you would like to add. The question is it recommended that kids go back to school in person this year or stay online if possible? And from JDRF's standpoint, this is something that is going to vary child by child, and it's something that is a decision that would need to be made family by family in consultation with your diabetes care team. And it's something that we as JDRF can't do kind of a blanket recommendation for.
Yeah, I think the Canadian Pediatric Society would echo that. We did do, actually, in collaboration with JDRF and Diabetes Canada last year, we did an information handout on going back to school and type 1. Of course, it was a very different situation that was pre-vaccines. But one thing we did encourage folks to think about was, what would you do if your child didn't have diabetes? And, just think through that. And, the decision is individual to each family for sure.
Great. And a question from Angela. Are you aware of any child with T1D that required specialized transportation to and from school?
I am not, because of the diabetes.
Yeah, Angela, I don't know if you want to, if you're online still, if you wanted to add a little more there.
Sure. Hopefully you can hear me. My signal isn't great.
You're good.
It was a teacher that mentioned it to me. We're basically 2.5 months in, and a teacher of last year said, "Oh, I think your son would qualify." And I guess I don't want to put him in that special category and do a fight for specialized transportation if that's not necessary. But I'm sort of getting the sense that I don't think they need specialized transportation on my end. My kids have a 45-minute bus ride both ways, so they get picked up first and they're the last to be dropped off. So I think my biggest fear is going to be the nighttime, the afternoon drive home, where he could potentially have a low. And
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That would worry me as well. So that's where for your individual care plan and in your meetings and stuff, let your teachers know that you want a blood sugar check. I don't know if your son has a CGM, but if not, you're going to want to make sure there's a blood sugar check before they get on that bus for that 45-minute ride. And always have supplies. And of course, definitely bus drivers are going to need to be a little bit in the know as well. I know some bus drivers and bus companies can get a little bit excited about eating on buses, but your son's going to have to be able to eat if he needs to on the bus, right? So again, it's that information that if he's eating, there's a reason for it.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. And a question here from Nancy. She said, I think that schools are not allowed to administer drugs to students. It would be wonderful if JDRF or CPS could help T1D parents behind the scenes with the government to allow teachers to administer a nasal glucagon in an emergency situation, as it's much like an EpiPen now. Or please correct me if I am incorrect.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that with injectable glucagon, that was a challenging situation because of that big needle and needing to be mixed and things like that. So I think it is a very different situation with the nasal glucagon, and we definitely do encourage people to be trained on it. Lily has a lovely little video. It's super easy that folks can watch. So again, about these expectations to go in there and say, this is if this situation happens, then this is the solution to it, and there are no needles, there are no nothing, but there's no reason for staff to not do it. I think you should have the expectation that that it be done if at all possible. We do recommend, and well, this was in the pre-nasal glucagon phase. We recommended that injectable glucagon, somebody be trained on it if the school was more than 20 minutes away from EMT. If it would take more than 20 minutes for I'm sorry, I'm losing my words here, for a paramedic to arrive at minimum. I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but we do recommend it.
Great. And Shelley's comment, and I will let everyone know we have about 5 minutes left, so we can probably get to about 2 more questions. And Shelley asks or notes, my child is the first type 1 in her school, and I sense that there is fear among staff. How do I reassure them? It's our first year. I'm also scared, and my daughter has been home since her diagnosis. She is in grade 5.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, it's so normal to be scared. It is so normal to be scared, regardless of what grade your child is in. The good thing is that she's, I don't know when she was diagnosed, but she's in grade 5, so she's probably doing a little bit of her care and able to participate in that. But good of you to recognize that there is a little bit of fear going on there, and that's where going back to addressing some of those myths, even asking them, what help me understand what the concern is, because the worst thing, what is the worst thing that could happen? Like the worst thing that this is what I think. The worst thing that could happen is a child loses consciousness, right? That's what we were all really, really scared of. Well, first of all, there is something that can be done about that. We have nasal glucagon, but also I like to say that if we do all of these other things, this won't happen. This is so preventable. Right? It is so preventable. And by, doing regular blood checks and paying attention to meals and snacks and all of those things, we will never get to that very scary situation. And so that's why we're giving you all this training and information. That's why the communication between home and school is so important, because we want to prevent, the worst case scenario from happening. So I'm not sure if that's helpful, but it sounds like you, Shelley, you already have a good sense of what's going on, and it sounds like you're being proactive, and let them know that by doing the training, by getting that information, they're empowering themselves, and also remind them that as parents of kids with type 1, I don't know about you, but I knew nothing about it until my daughter was diagnosed. So we were all once in that situation, and most of us are not health professionals. And, with good information, we've learned how to manage situations, and they can learn as well.
Great. And given time, we'll go with one last question here from Mike, who says that my child can bolus himself at home, but the school will not allow him to. So he has to wait to eat until the teacher is available from dealing with other students. We would like him to be able to bolus himself.
Wow, so would I. I would like him to be able to bolus himself too, with supervision, of course, depending on how old he is. So this to me is an inclusion issue, right? This is an issue that could very well have your son feeling stigmatized, feeling a little bit excluded, or feeling very different. And so I think that taking that tack and having a conversation about why it matters for him to eat when all the other kids are eating, right? I don't know about your school, but sometimes the kids don't have a long time to eat. It's important for them to be with the program and eat while they're eating, so that when everybody's done, they can all go out to recess together. So that's super important. And if he's able to do it, although I think you probably want him to have some supervision, right, to make sure those numbers are correct. All somebody has to do is watch him, and it just takes a few seconds. I mean, to me, that's a rights issue, right? To me, that's a rights issue, and it's easy for me to say I'm not dealing with them, but I don't think it's, what I'm trying to say is, I don't think it's an unreasonable expectation for you to have, that your son be able to do this himself, so that he feels part of his class, and he doesn't feel, pushed off to the side.
Okay, great. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight and for this amazing information. It was wonderful and amazingly helpful. And again, as we mentioned throughout this series, or throughout the evening, I do just want to mention again, one last time, the Connection series. The next session we will be having will be on September 22nd. So for any of those who this is the first time that their child will be going to school after they have had their diagnosis, this is a great chance to meet with other parents who have been there before, and talk about any challenges or successes that you have had. So once again, Elizabeth, thank you so much tonight. Thank you all for attending. And as I said as well, we will be posting this on JDRF's YouTube. All of the registrants for tonight, you will get an email that has a link to this session as well. So don't worry, you won't have to go hunting for it. And I'll put in the chat as well, if you do have any additional questions, you can always contact us at JDRF, and we would be more than happy to answer those. So unless there are any closing words that you'd like to add, Elizabeth, I will once again say thank you, and to everyone, have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.